Hello, thank you for joining me today. Well, this is the Tuesday, April 15th edition of our video devotionals. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hope your Tuesday's going well. And we're going to be in the book of 1 Kings today, chapter 17. Find that. We're going to read a little bit more verses than normal. I want to kind of summarize a chapter, so I'm going to need a little extra time today. So if you'll find that, if it is your custom, 1 Kings 17. We'll start there in verse 1. Otherwise, thank you for watching the videos. Appreciate all of you. And thank you for all the interactions, comments. We appreciate you very much. All right, here's where we're introduced to the prophet Elijah. Notice what it says in 1 Kings 17:1. And Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab, As the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. So there's the punishment upon the land. Wicked Ahab and Jezebel. So the land, I think, is going to end up being 3.5 years. So at that point, there's where it's been proclaimed to Ahab. Then the Bible tells us that God sends Elijah by this brook. The ravens feed him. The water runs out, dries up. And then he says, I need you to go somewhere else. So in verse 9, he goes down to a place called Zarephath, and there's a widow woman there that's going to take care of him. So notice verse 10. So he arose and went to Zarephath, and when he came to the gate of the city, behold, the widow woman was there gathering of sticks, and he called to her and said, Fetch me, I pray thee, a little water in a vessel, that I may drink. And as she was going to fetch it, he called to her and said, Bring me, I pray thee, a morsel of bread in thine hand. And she said, As the Lord thy God liveth, I have not a cake, but a handful of meal in a barrel, and a little oil in a cruse. And behold, I am gathering 2 sticks, that I may go in and dress it for me and my son, that we may eat it and die. Very bad situation. But you know what? She goes, and he says, Make me a little cake first, and then you can make what you need to make for you and your son. And she does that. And notice what it says here. It says, he said to her, For thus saith the Lord God of Israel, the barrel of meal shall not waste, neither shall the cruse of oil fail until the day that the Lord sendeth the rain upon the earth. And of course, that's what happened. Then we find out here in verse number 17 that her son gets sick and he dies. And she comes to him in verse 18, and she said unto Elijah, What have I to do with thee, O thou man of God? Art thou come unto me to call my sin to remembrance and to slay my son? She says, Oh no, is this judgment from God upon me? And then he goes in, and of course he prays to the Lord so that the child would have his life come back to him, and he comes back alive. Notice what she says in verse 24. And the woman said to Elijah, Now by this I know that thou art a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in thy mouth is truth. Notice, and the woman said to Elijah, Now by this I know. What is that? What is now by this I know? The raising of her son. You know, she didn't say that when she saw all this meal and this oil continue miraculously all this time. She didn't say it then. I tell you what, she did say it when she saw her son come back to life. And of course, Elijah had prayed that that would happen, and it did. So here's, I guess, the point I want to make today. All of us as children of God have God miraculously do things for us. We could have many testimonies. I could tell you many, and probably through these 5+ years, we have mentioned some things about that. But here's the point. Sometimes God does things in our life, and we may not manifest certain, or we're not enlightened to see God like we should see him, because God's done so many good things, and all of a sudden something does happen. In this case, it was the raising of her son from the dead. And she says, Now I know you're a man of God. You know what? Sometimes God has to do things and allow things to happen for us to see God in a more clear way, or at least manifest to us in such a way. She says, I know this is a man of God because here's what I saw him do. He brought my son back to life. Now, she didn't say it with the others. So maybe sometimes we see all the miracles, and then God has to put something in our life to really get our attention sometimes, or maybe even manifest something that maybe we should have manifested before. You would think she would have said, You know what, man, thank you, man of God. And maybe she did. But I know this, that was a pretty heavy thing for her son to die. And she even said, Man, is this the judgment of God? But God said, You know what? Your son's going to live again, and he did. And by this. So are there things in our life, or is there things yet to come in our life where God has to bring us to a situation, and then we say, Now I know. You know, Job said that. Job says, I've talked about you, God, but now I know. Now I clearly know who you are. So let's certainly give God the honor and the glory and the credit for all the things he does. But also remember, sometimes God may bring something into our life in which we say, Now I know. And if he does, then you know what? That's a good thing for us to see and to experience. All right. I don't know how much that helps you, but hopefully it does today. Lord willing, we'll see you back tomorrow on Wisdom Wednesday. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.